Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Lauer, and welcome to Headliners and Legends. In the next hour, one of the most outrageous comic talents of recent times, who always kept us guessing until suddenly he was gone. Watch with us as a troubled youngster from Long Island makes headlines and becomes a comedy legend.
In this edition of Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer, Andy Kaufman.
To try to define Andy Kaufman, I mean, I couldn't attempt it.
Give me a minute while I go to the can.
He was funny, all right.
Thank you very much.
But he was something different.
Andy Kaufman could not tell you a joke to save his life.
His joke was on us. It was often hard to tell what was real and what was a performance.
Was Andy Kaufman insane?
Well, he was mentally disturbed like most performers.
You hear me?
Who was Andy Kaufman really?
I will get you for this.
I think he was a very good actor, but I really think he was a performance artist.
It's zany, it's edgy, it's whimsical.
Will we ever know the truth about his act, his life, and his death? No doubt about it. He could be crude and crass, or turn around and be sweet and naive. Andy Kaufman was a comic who cared less about making his audience laugh than keeping them confused. The subject of a movie starring Jim Carrey that's already making news, Kaufman delighted in breaking barriers and smashing what few taboos remained. In the brief, strange life of Andy Kaufman, nothing was sacred.
Fall 1975. With Watergate and Vietnam in our recent memory, the nation is struggling to recover its sense of humor.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
To reinvent late-night television comedy.
The not-for-ready primetime players.
Side by side with the not-ready for primetime players is special guest star Andy Kaufman.
And now, here's Andy Kaufman. Mr. Trouble never hangs around when he hears this mighty sound. Here I come to save the day. I think the mighty mouse is on the way.
Lip-syncing to a scratchy Mighty Mouse recording, Andy Kaufman creeps silently and endearingly into the public consciousness.
Andy was the first person ever booked to be on the first show, even though we had no idea what the show was going to be all about.
Young NBC executive Dick Ebersol has been charged to come up with something new for late night. Andy Kaufman's act is unlike anything he's ever seen.
Almost everything that I'd certainly seen to that point was humor with a...
The first time on television had been even more bizarre.
Okay, Andy, we're recording, and you're on.
It's a spoken rendition of the song MacArthur's Park.
Someone left the cake out in the rain. I don't think that I can take it, 'cause it took so long to bake it, and I'll never have that recipe again. Oh no.
Andy, could you do that again, please?
Though he is, Andy Kaufman had taken the cutting-edge world of comedy clubs by storm.
There aren't too many acts that I can remember the very first time I saw them, but Andy, of course, I'll never forget.
I would like to imitate
He shows up and he talks to me as the foreign man. Good evening, Mr. Friedman. I am Andy Kaufman. I said, oh, strange accent. Where are you from, kid? I am from an island in the Caspian Sea. Well, I didn't know there were no islands in the Caspian Sea at the time, and I said, great, okay, you'll go on after the next act.
This guy's awful. Awful. And he starts doing impressions.
The worst imitations I've ever heard.
The audience is looking and looking, and they don't know what to make of. There's sort of a few titters and all that.
And then he says, I would like to do the Elvis Presley. And everyone is going, oh, no, man.
And then a very strange thing happens at the Improv. There's light cues, and there's music cues. And by then, he turns around and he's Elvis.
He does the greatest Elvis Presley I've ever seen in my life, or I think anyone has ever seen.
Thank you very much.
You're saying, heck, I've been had. This guy's something else.
All I ask is please, please love me. Oh, yeah.
But the ruse hasn't ended yet.
Thank you very much.
So now you're not sure. Is it a guy from this little island in the Caspian Sea that just happens to do a drop-dead Elvis impression?
After introducing himself that night, Bob Zmuda will become Andy's best friend and his collaborator. His book describes Andy's comic genius and his private antics.
The world of Kaufmanism is based on, if you had to frame this comedically, it's based on the practical joke, the put-on, the hoax.
Andy's philosophy in performing and comedy was to just take the audience as far as he could, and then bring them back sometimes.
He was like the guy who churns things up, the guy who comes in, invades the space, and then makes it his own, and you play along or not.
I was mesmerized by it. On the other hand, it was like being at a car wreck because it was different than anything that I'd ever seen before that called itself comedy.
I want it quiet. If I hear one more sound, I'm going to close this book and forget about the whole thing.
Laughter, it seems, is beside the point.
He wanted to hear the silence more than any comic we may ever know. The rest of them want to hear the laughs. He wanted to see how long he could keep the silence going, and then he'd put out a little rope, and then he'd rope him back in with a laugh.
He was working you constantly.
Coming up, how Andy's Long Island childhood shaped his comedy career.
Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer is brought to you by Snap.com.
Today, a teenager in Madrid and a teenager in Atlanta discovered an international language, boys. Today, Don Reed found the mutual fund that will put his kids through college. Some new roommates in Boston found their first piece of furniture. Tony Ramos made his latest dance mix available to techno fans worldwide. And Charles Beckman got in touch with his high school sweetheart 60 years after their first kiss. And they all found it on Snap.com.
Shannon Sharp, please. Has always talking trash.
You're paying, baby!
He's always trying to get inside your head.
Seahorse, you don't know your elbows from your...
And sometimes, he can get downright nasty.
I bet you pay transaction fees on your mutual funds. Your mama pays full commission. You know how to calculate a P/E ratio?
When we created a smarter kind of investment firm,
How diversified is your portfolio?
we created a smarter kind of investor.
You can't even spell Dow Jones. Woo! Okay, guys, let's get this right. To calculate a P/E ratio, you divide the stock price.
Your attention, please. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
For the only other person in the world, a diamond. Show her you'll love her for the next 1,000 years. A diamond is forever. De Beers.
The Internet's growing. More choices, lower prices. Now cable technology could lower your local phone bills and give you high-speed access to the Internet. Yet some companies want government to jump in and regulate the Internet. But the LA Information Technology Agency has found that a wait-and-see approach is best for consumers. And more than 65,000 Californians have signed a petition to keep the Internet unregulated. Join us. Let consumers decide. The Internet's growing. More choices, lower prices. Now cable technology could lower your local phone bills and give you high-speed access to the Internet. Yet some companies want government to jump in and regulate the Internet. But the LA Information Technology Agency has found that a wait-and-see approach is best for consumers. And more than 65,000 Californians have signed a petition to keep the Internet unregulated. Join us. Let consumers decide.
Boston takes on the biggest issues on Internight, weeknights at 7 on MSNBC.
This is Headliners and Legends.
Spring 1945.
Would you like to swing on a...
The war is ending, and Stanley Kaufman returns home to New York with 3 Purple Hearts. In 10 days, he'll marry his sweetheart, Janice Bernstein, who had been a teen model. Their honeymoon is spent crisscrossing the continent in a Plymouth convertible, with both their mothers in tow. It is a harbinger of how close-knit and important family will be. But for Stanley and Janice, starting a family of their own is difficult. Janice suffers 3 miscarriages, then their firstborn miracle.
There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
Andy the baby was an absolutely beautiful child.
Andrew Jeffrey Kaufman arrives in Queens, New York on January 17, 1949.
We just adored him. He was our first child, and surrounded by 4 grandparents, and of course he had the adulation of all of us.
My mother tells me we have this record player. She used to leave it on all the time. I'd plug it in, the record would go on, I'd jump up and down and lip sync to the records and everything.
I kind of think he just got lucky one day. The record player was near and he bumped it and it went on, but still it's good for the story.
By now, the Kaufman family has moved to Great Neck, a prosperous Long Island suburb right outside New York City.
Papa loves mambo.
Andy's father has reluctantly settled into the family's costume jewelry business. It is early in the child-centered, soon-to-be-called baby boom. Andy has been joined by a brother Michael and a sister Carol, and a nanny named Margaret. By all accounts, it is a New York version of Father Knows Best, but Father is a bit of a renegade, with a sense of humor and a temper.
My impression was my father did not want to be thought of like everybody else.
Then, with the death of the cherished grandfather Cy, the family's sense of safe haven is disrupted, especially Andy's.
He loved me very, very much, and I loved him. He used to sit with me in the living room at night and sing this one song that he taught me, which was our song that us two had together. It was the grandfather's clock stood 90 years on the wall, but it stopped short, never to go again when the old man died.
And Papa Cy passed away, I guess, when Andy must have been about 2 years old. And he wants to know where Papa Cy is. And so the easiest thing to say was he went on a trip. With another child, it might have been a satisfactory answer.
When I got older, my mother said that they realized that it was a mistake for them to tell me that, because then I kept saying, well, why didn't he take me with him?
Perhaps that's even where Andy's fantasy world started.
I really, truly believe that traumatic experience of the death of his grandfather, him being lied to about it, taught him a big life lesson that I do not have to accept reality. Now, psychologically, right, this is not a good place to be in life. And yet, it made his career.
Mikey Mouse is off.
Andy finds escape in a box called television.
Of course, Howdy Doody was his favorite.
I'm getting impatient. Well, so am I.
More and more, Andy retreats into this world of television, only he begins to pull the string.
From the time I was small, as I was growing up, I would put on television shows in my bedroom. And I really thought there was a camera in the wall and that there were millions of people watching me somewhere. So I had a whole afternoon of programming every day. I'd put on adventures, comedies, tragedies, thrillers.
And we'd hear him in the den, and it sounded like as if he had a friend in there.
But Andy is always alone.
I was like, more the normal kid who would be outside playing the sports and doing whatever else to be accepted by everybody. It appears that Andy didn't have the same need for acceptance.
I think I might have created problems for him because my younger son, Michael, was a fabulous athlete. I remember Andy standing out in the outfield. Instead of facing the batter, he was looking into the trees somewhere.
His dad didn't really understand him. Andy was a little weird little kid. And I think Stanley might get mad at me for saying this, but I have a feeling Stanley yelled at Andy a lot, you know, and really gave him a hard time. And to me, I think, well, perhaps Andy had to do something with that. He had to turn that into humor.
Increasingly, Andy loses himself in his imaginary co-stars, and his parents find this even more troubling.
When I got older, my mother really began worrying, and she said, you cannot do this anymore unless you have an audience.
Soon, Andy is entertaining kids in the neighborhood.
When I was 8, I entertained at children's birthday parties, but for no pay. When I was 14, I accepted my first money, $5. I'd show movies, do magic, play games, play the guitar, have a tape recorder, do the same thing I'm doing now, only for little kids. You're the first friend from television I ever had.
Thank you, Andy.
It seemed even then that his future was sealed.
He used to tell me when I was little, Carol, one day I'm going to be famous and I'm going to be on TV. And I always believed him.
But Andy is out of step with the present. It's 1964, and just miles away, the Beatles are landing at Idlewild Airport, sending most kids in Andy's neighborhood into a frenzy. But Andy is obsessed with Elvis.
Well, Elvis was the king to him.
I would stay home most of the time and just play his records and imitate him. Adopted him as a character, combed my hair like him, dressed like him. I was actually working on my Elvis Presley imitation, like most of the day for 1 year.
Around this same time, Andy will be hooked for life by wrestling. He recalls seeing Buddy Rogers lose his world title at Madison Square Garden in 1963.
I remember the frenzy that he brought to the crowd. He was to wrestling what Muhammad Ali was to boxing, what Elvis Presley was to rock and roll music.
The antisocial child has found flesh and blood role models and an appreciative audience. But perhaps most importantly, Andy has made his parents proud.
The kids just loved him. And we got calls from the parents complimenting him and saying, what a wonderful boy, how great he's doing. So heck, we were very proud of him.
Coming up, Andy Kaufman becomes a rebellious teen.
Headliners and Legends will continue in a moment.
At 12, he was already famous. By 17, he was America's first TV teen idol, Ricky Nelson. Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer. Tomorrow at 10 on MSNBC.
I'm concerned about my cholesterol. Got a bike. Cutting back on junk food. But it's not all that easy. Fortunately, my wife Joy discovered a new spread called Take Control. Take Control is made from natural soybean extract. Studies suggest it helps to lower bad cholesterol up to 10%. That's why Take Control helps promote my healthy cholesterol levels. And it's delicious.
New Take Control, a weapon to help lower cholesterol.
I'm from AXA Advisors.
AXA Advisors. Yes.
That's a new name.
For thousands of financial professionals, like me.
And me.
We help people take the long view. Achieve goals like college tuition.
A secure retirement.
A better life.
It's all based
on a relationship. A long-term relationship. And soon, very soon,
we can start working.
Together.
Building your future.
AXA Advisors. Building futures.
Some people get nervous when that door goes up. Not me. But then I deliver to all the shops. Nervous people like crunchy food. Don't sell much nervous food here.
Good Wrench Good Time Savings means great deals, like lube, oil, and filter for only $19.99 or less. It's a good time to see GM Good Wrench Service Plus.
Good time savings? No wonder I don't sell any nervous food here.
If you could accompany your data on its trip overseas, the experience would be alarming. Local carriers handing it to national carriers, over to cable carriers, until you don't know who has your data. Unless you send it through here, with the one and only company that owns the entire network, local, national, and international. So you know who has your data.
OnNet from MCI WorldCom. This is Headliners and Legends.
Andy was a good Jewish boy from Great Neck, and it drove him nuts.
Greenwich Village, 1965. The revolution is in full swing, and beat culture will soon give way to flower power.
Once upon a time you dressed so fine, you threw the bumps of dime in your prime, didn't you?
For Andy Kaufman, rebellion is in the air, and nearby New York City beckons.
He started venturing in New York to Greenwich Village, and he wrote poetry and stuff. And he was getting stoned and all that, and a whole new world opened to him.
Beat poetry replaces the children's birthday parties. Andy's schoolwork starts to suffer, and conflicts with the grown-ups in his life reemerge.
I think it was 11th grade or 10th grade, the teacher said, I'm passing him only because I don't want to take a chance on getting him in my class again next year.
I was on him for his schoolwork. I was on him for his hair. Hair. Now, there is something that every parent should be aware of.
It was great having Andy as an older brother. There was no pressure. There was no teacher who ever said, why can't you be more like your brother?
Now Andy is exploring other levels of reality through drugs and alcohol.
Between the ages of 16 and 19 is when I was smoking marijuana every day, taking DET, LSD, DMT, dexedrine, all kinds of things.
Somehow, Andy manages to get through high school. It is 1967, and though Vietnam couldn't be further removed from Andy's life in Great Neck, he has to register for the draft. Once again, his fantasy life proves invaluable. Andy gets a psychiatric deferment by scoring 0 on the reality tests. His father Stanley suggests he take a year to find himself.
Andy did whatever he wanted. He was a car hop at one of the country clubs. He was a delivery boy for one of the guys out in Great Neck. He drove a taxi. He worked in the soda fountain. He worked as a chauffeur. He didn't mind work.
Andy moves to Boston in the fall of '68 to attend junior college. Within months, he will experiment with a new reality-altering exercise.
Originally, what drew Andy Kaufman to transcendental meditation was a gorgeous girl who was into it. He swore by it. It gave him self-esteem. It gave him a career. It cleaned up his life. To Andy, TM is the magic that gets him to do what he does.
It also is the magic that gets him off drugs.
The last time I took any drugs of any type was November 20th, 1968. That was 15 days before I started meditating.
Transcendental meditation was everything to Andy. It was everything to Andy. It saved his life.
Around this same time, Andy's girlfriend from Great Neck visits him. 9 months later, on July 19th, 1969, Andy's parents find out they're grandparents, but the baby will be put up for adoption.
He was cool. I was angry at him. I was angry at him because I thought maybe somehow we should have been aware. And for many, many years, we never talked about it. We told no relatives, no friends. It was our secret.
He had this ability to just not deal with something that might be negative to him. So no, he didn't agonize over, at least not to me, about his daughter. He mentioned her a couple times.
Andy did talk to me about his daughter quite a bit, and he contemplated someday trying to find her.
After Andy's death, it's his daughter, now a mother herself, who will track down her birth family.
We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out.
That same summer of '69, Andy makes a trip out west in search of his hero. With a 200-page manuscript he's written called God, he hitchhikes to Vegas to meet Elvis. As the story goes, he hides in the kitchen of the hotel where Elvis is performing, and when Elvis passes on his way to the stage, Andy leaps out.
Andy said, you know, I'm your biggest fan. I wrote this book about you. And then he said, and this was, I think this was one of the most biggest influential moments in Andy's life. He said to him, he said, someday I'm going to be famous too. And Elvis looked at me and patted him on the shoulder and went, that's very good. And he kept going. But that was it. He now had the benediction from the king himself.
Andy returns to Boston and begins to make his mark, but almost by chance. Andy is asked to be in a talent show.
The next night, he went on that stage, and he did The Cow Goes Moo. He does the same act he does for 7 or 8-year-olds, but now he's doing it for adults. And that would become the secret and magic of Andy Kaufman.
So what I'm doing now is really what I've been doing in my room ever since I was little, and so I'm just able to do it on TV.
Soon, Andy has his own show on college TV. It's called Uncle Andy's Funhouse and is reminiscent of those Great Neck birthday parties.
Direct from Andy Kaufman's parents' house in Westbury, Long Island.
I think you're catching on. I think what Andy did as a child, I think grew and was developed all throughout his life into what he did later on in life.
It never changed, you know, and everything he did in life was trying to kind of not recapture, but retain the feeling of childhood.
In a few years, Andy will take Uncle Andy's Funhouse to the comedy clubs of New York and eventually to national television. But there's beginning to be something about the act that gives it a slightly subversive twist.
They're supposed to be low fat, but don't be fooled. Some foods may not be as healthy as you think. Find out why on Special Edition, tonight, 11 Eastern on MSNBC.
3 cold fronts on the satellite loop this evening, one dropping into the plains and Great Lakes, one off the east coast back across Florida, and a third moving into the northwest coast. There'll be occasional rain over portions of Florida right through Wednesday. Scattered showers will move from the Great Lakes to New England, also the Pacific Northwest into the northern Rockies. Lows tonight from the 20s in northern Minnesota to 70s in South Florida. Tomorrow, 70s and 80s over much of the southern half of the country. Chilly in the Great Lakes.
You know the stories, but do you know the real story?
We said, let's see what audiences think of us together.
That's no problem. No problem.
And maybe I went too far, I don't know.
Would you like to see me tap dance?
On Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer, all this week at 10 on MSNBC. You hear a lot of talk in prime time, but at One News Network, it's a different story.
Ready to defibrillate.
Stories that teach, excite, and move you on Special Edition with Ann Curry. The day's biggest stories on the news with Brian Williams. And stories about the people who change our world. Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer. Prime time on MSNBC. It's a different story.
It's like today, only later. Later today. Weekdays on NBC.
Hey, Los Angeles, Hollywood Joe for La Brea Chevrolet, and we're having the biggest liquidation sale in the history of our store. We're talking Astro, Vet, Tahoe, Suburban, Blazer. We're taking thousands off the price right now at La Brea Chevrolet. In addition to that, how about $4,000 off the price of a 1999 Suburban? You know what that makes me want to do? $4,000 off the price of a Suburban, 0% financing on Astro vans. Well, it makes me want to dance. And I'll dance, and I'll dance, and I'll dance the night away.
If your business needs to reach new customers, Media One is the answer.
Definitely, I would recommend Media One to anyone looking for advertising. Advertising with Media One is the best thing that Jesse's has ever done as far as their advertising. Since we started advertising on Media One Cable, we've had approximately about a 15% increase in our retail business.
Cable television is the answer. Call Media One today.
This is Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer.
At this point in our story, Andy Kaufman has made his name on Saturday Night Live, but it will be his sitcom Taxi that brings him fame. And as he settles into the role of lovable Latka, he's almost compelled to explore his darker side with a repulsive lounge lizard character. It will be on the set of Taxi that a bizarre tale of multiple personalities unfolds. It's a tale that confuses people to this day.
It is 1978, and in TV land, Laverne and Shirley, the Fonz, and Mork and Mindy dominate the top slots. The producers who had scored big with Mary Tyler Moore are cooking up an even quirkier situation comedy.
Taxi was not your average sitcom. It was the top-of-the-line sitcom. It was the best crap going, but to him it was crap.
Well, bye-bye. It was nice meeting you.
Andy considers himself an artist.
Boy, sure is a long walk back.
He hates the American sitcom. He hates the phony laughter. He hates the whole design of it. He thinks it's just not funny. It has nothing to do with what he does.
But in fact, it has everything to do with what Andy Kaufman does. The Taxi producers want Andy's foreign man character.
Hello. I am like Gravin.
They were the hottest producers in town. So I spoke to Andy about it, and Andy said, you know, I don't like to do sitcoms. You know, it sort of cuts down on my own creativity. I want to create material for myself.
By now, George Shapiro, one of Hollywood's most successful comedy managers, represents Andy.
I said, but this you have to do. I mean, you have to do this. This could change your whole life, your whole career.
Okay, I gotta get tough with you guys.
Andy agrees to do Taxi with certain conditions.
He said, you know, I really am not cut out for this schedule. But he was so good that the producers let him stay. They said, okay, you just have to come Tuesday afternoons for the Tuesday run-through, and then you have to come on Friday nights for the show.
And we would just go with it, like everybody would go with it pretty much.
But there is another condition.
Andy thought about it. He said, well, I'll tell you, I will do it if they hire Tony Clifton. Tony Clifton is a really obnoxious lounge singer.
But Tony Clifton isn't really Tony Clifton. He's an alter ego character that Andy has been developing in the club. Clifton is Dr. Jekyll, the foreign man's sweet Mr. Hyde.
When he became Tony, there was nothing left of Andy there. Andy was a vegetarian. Andy never smoked. Andy never drank. Tony drank around the clock, steaks and prime rib around the clock. That was Tony. Chain smoker, Camels, you know, one after the other.
Every girl in the place he's hitting on, you know, he's a pig. He stinks. Smells like Limburger cheese. That was Tony I was talking about. It was not Andy. Andy's a sweetheart.
Tony was gross. Tony was abusive to women. Tony was vain, which Andy never was.
Yeah, I'll show you, humor. That's humor. That's humor. That's humor, pal.
And Andy reveled in being Tony. He did. He did.
And he reveled in misleading the audience about Tony Clifton's true identity.
You know, Tony Clifton is a man that I saw in 1969 in Las Vegas, and I used to imitate him, put makeup on and imitate him. But about a year ago, the real man, I was able to afford to hire the real man. That's who has been opening for me now.
In this 1979 performance at Carnegie Hall, Andy Kaufman denies that he is playing Tony Clifton, and he always speaks of him in the third person. So does Tony Clifton when he speaks of Andy.
Kaufman's been using my name to get places.
And so there is no truth to the rumor that you're actually Andy Kaufman?
There's no truth to that one whatsoever.
To make matters worse, Clifton is sometimes played by Andy's friend Bob Zamuda or his brother Michael. But confusion is the whole idea, and as far as we know, this performance at Carnegie Hall is the only time both Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton ever share the stage.
Nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the morning.
Whether or not they inhabit the same body, George Shapiro negotiates a bizarre contract, whereas Andy will do 14 out of 22 episodes of Taxi, and Tony Clifton will do 4.
I never negotiated a contract like that before or since. And I don't think I ever will exactly.
So Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton, whoever he is, reluctantly join an ensemble of other unforgettable oddballs. Taxi premieres on September 12, 1978.
Give me a minute while I go to the can. Thank you very much.
The audience loved him. The critics loved him. He just was a smash hit right out of the box.
But soon it is Tony Clifton's turn. He is to appear on the 10th episode of Taxi, and on this day at least, Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton do share the same body.
And this was a Christmas show, and it was my show, Louis' show, and Tony was playing my brother.
He showed up with 2 bimbos and a bottle of scotch to the set of Taxi on the Monday that we started rehearsal.
By the second day of shooting, Tony Clifton is wreaking havoc on the set of Taxi.
The guy couldn't act his way out of a paper bag. So the first 2 days were shot. We were just holding his hand. It was terrible.
Ed Weinberg calls me on Tuesday night, and he said it's just not working out with Tony Clifton.
So they set up a thing where Weinberger was going to fire him because he was late
On the third day, Tony Clifton shows up late, with a lady on each arm. George Shapiro, expecting a scene, shows up with his audio recorder, and Tony Clifton will make headlines.
Tony's walking back, center stage, and he's saying, let's get the show on the road, let's go. And it got to be very intense. Ed Weinberg is calling me as his manager on the stage, I'm walking down around stage to get him out.
And he went ballistic, and he wouldn't leave, and he was like, you know, all over the place.
They said, well, okay, you have to move on. He says, no, I'm not leaving, I have a contract. And it got out of hand, and Judd Hirsch was furious.
Get him in the circus wagon and take him out of here. I got a contract for a whole lot more shows than you got. Yeah, I got a contract for 4 shows on this one show here off the lot. Come on, let's get the out of here. Come on.
Judd was pissed off at him. Judd was yelling at him and pulling him. He just lost his cool. But enough was enough.
I will be back one day when I play Vegas. I'll be a big star, you win it, see?
It is vintage Andy Kaufman with Tony Clifton pulling the strings.
He was so excited. He said, George, this is like the greatest day of my life. This is what I loved.
And Andy Kaufman will go to greater and greater lengths to blur the lines of where reality ends and insanity begins.
You can lapse and say, come on, Andy, snap out of it. You're not Tony Clifton. But, you know, it's kind of foolish for you to do that because it's not Andy. It's Tony. It's so bizarre.
Headliners and Legends will continue in a moment.
Now, there's a primetime newscast in sync with your life. The News with Brian Williams. Weeknights, 9 Eastern and Pacific on MSNBC.
Who's at the center of online investing? The engine driving the revolution? The power behind the boom? Knight, the world's leading market maker, where the trade gets done.
Today, a mechanic in Seattle and a secretary in Oslo began falling in love. While 2 jewelry designers in LA got their first order from a boutique in Argentina. Sharon and John Miller avoided a fight by getting the directions ahead of time. Melissa Hernandez got a better job with a better paycheck. And today, Mark Lyons found a bigger house, and not a moment too soon. And they all found it on Snap.com.
We started this business with a green thumb, a vivid imagination,
And a lot of hard work.
but before long, I could see we needed help, financial help.
So I called American Express Small Business Services.
They helped us with equipment financing so we could keep on growing.
And with the corporate card, we finally got a handle on expenses.
1-800-SUCCESS was the best call we ever made.
With American Express, we've learned what it's like to have a partner you can count on.
And a brother.
When pain shakes your world, it's time for Bengay SPA with site-penetrating action. It targets relief at the site of pain, and it has a light, fresh scent. Bengay SPA. It feels like a whole new day.
Remember life in the fast lane? First you meet, then you get married, and things slow down.
Yeah, right.
To help you keep up, drive the supercharged Regal GS Sports Sedan. Plenty of room, standard traction control, and the most power in its class. Get up to $35.67 average finance savings with 1.9% APR financing for 60 months on 1999 Regals. Official car of the supercharged family.
I may look young, but I still suffer from hot flashes. I discovered a natural way to deal with it. New Healthy Woman from the makers of Monistat. Healthy Woman's a soy menopause supplement that helps relieve hot flashes in a natural way. New Healthy Woman.
Where do you find leading technology? Experienced traders, all working to help you get the best price? Knight, the world's leading market maker, where the trade gets done.
This is Headliners and Legends.
1979. Michael Jackson is dreaming of a new look, while the classic 10 is prancing in our dreams. Saturday Night Live has exploded from cult hit to appointment television, and Taxi wins the first of 3 Emmys for Best Comedy. Andy Kaufman, Sweet Lotka in primetime, decides he's going to be the first intergender wrestling champion in his off time. Wrestling is put on personified, and it gives Andy another opportunity to create a character who will be booed.
Anytime, baby. I don't think you can do it. Come on, baby. Wrestle me.
I wanted to somehow bring wrestling into my act. Now, if I challenged men, I would get beat very easily, and they might even hurt me. So I challenged the women.
But according to Bob Zamuda, who refereed Andy's matches, there is something even more appealing about it.
Wrestling for Andy was not so much a part of his act as performance. It was a sexual turn-on for him.
And sexual foreplay. Zamuda claims Andy propositioned many of his opponents as he pinned them to the mat.
I would say that Andy Kaufman, of over the 300 women that he wrestled, he probably slept with 20 or 30% of them.
Whether or not the audience knew exactly what was going down on those wrestling mats, one thing many of them did know. They didn't like it.
At colleges and in clubs, it worked well. I had a difference of opinion with Andy when he started wrestling on television, because on television I just felt instinctively it was going to hurt his career.
Absolutely, it polarized his audience. Oh, yeah. I mean, they did not know what to make of it. They really didn't.
I will pay $1,000 to any woman that will beat me in this ring.
But Andy was not about to be discouraged. After all, the booze and the controversy are what he is seeking. Ironically, what he will find is the woman he will spend the rest of his life with.
That was the first thing I knew about Andy, was the wrestling side of Andy, and I understood it completely.
Lynn Margulies also grew up watching wrestling. She meets Andy on the set of a film she will edit, starring Andy and wrestler Fred Blassie. Their first flirtation is captured on film when she's pulled into the scene.
What did you say your name was?
Andy Kaufman, lock on tap.
And that was it. You know, he never left my place. That was it. We were inseparable after that.
Meanwhile, Andy is taking the wrestling as far as it will go.
It was becoming more and more apparent that the audience was demanding that Andy wrestle a man.
Here we go, and the bell time has sounded.
On April 5th, 1982, in Memphis, Tennessee, Andy Kaufman wrestles Jerry the King Lawler. But
the man caught me, and he did what he did, and it landed me in the hospital for 3 days. And now I'm totally sold on that wrestling is totally real.
But was he really injured, or was it another Andy put-on? It depends on who you talk to. Andy wears a neck brace for weeks afterward, and the two challengers meet again on the Letterman show. It is supposed to be a rapprochement.
I'm sorry, but you're a...
Once again, even his friends aren't sure if it's a setup.
And it was just the two of us. And Andy had his neck brace on. And I said, Andy. And he went, I said, come on, there's nobody in here. It's just you and me. What's the scoop? You know? And he just looked at me.
You never know with Andy. You know, you never know how much is planned.
And confusion reigns on this late-night live show called Friday.
Why do you have to be so quick? What?
Though the producer is in cahoots with Andy, most of the cast and crew are left in the dark, so the scuffle is in the eye of the beholder. Not the mainstream press nor his flesh and blood ever quite know what is real and what is staged. Andy liked it that way.
I thought he blew his whole career that night. And I'm embarrassed to admit it, because as his brother, I shouldn't be fooled by anything.
I've often wondered where that came from exactly, that joy in confusing people and making them angry. The angrier people got at Andy, the funnier he thought it was.
Don't try that again. Don't try that again.
But some people are beginning to wonder if Andy is out of control. Maybe even Andy.
And maybe I went too far, I don't know. That's what most people are telling me.
Was Andy Kaufman insane? Does a bear in the woods... Yeah, I guess he was. I guess he was insane, but it was a controlled insanity.
Oh, he knew what he was doing all the time. Definitely, definitely. I would argue with anybody who would say otherwise. I mean, I think that's what his genius was.
No one knows what it's like to be the sad man behind blue eyes.
I don't care what you do for yourself, but you've not only ruined your career, but you ruined my career too.
So what? Who cares?
Because of you, everybody doesn't like me either.
So why should everybody like you? The way you talk, the way you walk?
I think I know why. I think it's because you are really underneath it all. I think you're a little shy.
What?
A shy little man.
No.
A little scared little man.
They're supposed to be low fat, but don't be fooled. Some foods may not be as healthy as you think. Find out why on Special Edition next on MSNBC. At 12, he was already famous. By 17, he was America's first TV teen idol, Ricky Nelson. Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer. Tomorrow at 10 on MSNBC.
For years, the photo center at Walgreens has been known for quality photo processing. Now, with the Kodak Picture Maker, you can create do-it-yourself prints in a number of different sizes in less than 5 minutes. You can even get a set of prints on floppy disk or the internet, so you can send your photos online. Create photo greeting cards today, and they're ready the next day. Walgreens Photo Center, where America takes its pictures.
Over 70 million people
are receiving an education on the internet this year.
7 out of 10 students on the web
say they are getting better grades.
One day, training for every job on Earth.
Training for every job on Earth will be available on the internet.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Virtually all internet traffic travels across the systems of one company, Cisco Systems, empowering the internet generation.
Are you ready?
Are you? In the year 2000, how old will you be? Who can do the math? You'll be my age. Wonder what you'll be doing.
Back then, you couldn't imagine you'd be at Walt Disney World, still feeling like a kid. Come be part of a year-long Millennium celebration you'll never forget. Just call 1-407-WDisney.
We'll be too old to do anything. Celebrate the future, hand in hand.
Hey, Los Angeles, Joe Davis for La Brea Chevrolet. You know my little buddy Spec? Well, let me introduce you to his older brother, Elvis. Elvis here's been sniffing around town for a deal that makes sense, and he's found it at La Brea Chevrolet. Right now at La Brea Chevrolet, 1 cent down. That's right, 1 penny down at La Brea Chevrolet puts you in a new or used car. Right, guys?
Right.
So for a deal that makes sense, grab a penny and head on down to La Brea Chevrolet and tell them Elvis sent you.
The world's first active head restraint, designed to reduce whiplash. From Saab.
This is Headliners and Legends with Matt Lauer.
It's so great to be back. You know, as some of you know, I was gone for a few years. I gave up show business in order to wrestle women.
It was only sort of a joke. Andy Kaufman's career is beginning to feel the effects of all the controversy he is creating.
And then the big thing was the Saturday Night Live vote. And that's when things really changed, I think.
You will decide whether one man will ever appear on this show again. That man is Andy Kaufman.
The idea was Andy's. It was inspired by an earlier Saturday Night Live episode when Eddie Murphy challenged viewers to decide the fate of Larry the Lobster.
During the next hour, unless you call in to save him, we're going to boil Larry's little butt right here on national television. Let's boil that sucker, eh?
All of us were totally shocked to find that our so-called edgy audience had voted to save Larry the Lobster.
Larry, live!
Producer Dick Ebersol is reluctant to allow Andy's fate to be in the same fickle hands.
And from the first, I said to Andy, you know, you could lose this vote. And he really didn't believe that he would lose the vote.
Andy persuades Dick to proceed. The viewers will be charged 50 cents per phone call.
And we're doing this for real. Andy Kaufman's career at Saturday Night Live is in your hands.
But from the beginning, it's just click, 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 click going against him.
And tonight I'm asking you to vote to save a human being. Okay, now isn't Andy Kaufman worth as much as a lobster. You know, I mean, I think so. What do we have to do? Get Andy out there and boil him alive to make your vote?
The final tally. To keep Andy, ladies and gentlemen, 169,186 votes. To dump Andy, 195,544. Sorry, Andy, you'll never be on Saturday Night Live again.
Andy lost, and it wasn't close. And I was devastated.
So it seems was Andy.
Maybe one day Saturday Night Live will have a change of heart, or I'll find another show that I could go on.
I think it affected him very, very badly. And I have never really forgiven the person who I feel is responsible for the decision to take him off.
I don't think there's any doubt that losing the vote ultimately turned out to be a real blow to Andy. But the vote, and this is what I kept preaching to him, there was a basic compact with the audience when you do that. It can't be a joke.
It turns out to be just the first of a series of blows that will have a cumulative effect over the next year. But through it all, David Letterman continues to support Andy.
But my first guest tonight, he has been here with us many, many times before. Please welcome Andy Kaufman. Andy!
In some of those appearances, it almost seems like Andy is tying up loose ends.
Mommy and Daddy, I never told you this before, but I just want to say I love you both very much. And we love you.
A month after this appearance, Taxi is canceled. In May, Andy's mother has bypass surgery followed by a massive stroke, though she will live several years more. That same spring, his Broadway premiere opens and closes after 2 performances.
There's a whole series of things that happened to Andy. And he really was up against the ropes.
And now it's time for the Has-Been Corner.
For someone obsessed with failure, it is a tenuous time.
And he said to me and George, he said, I'm losing my mind. I'm going to take a TM course in Switzerland.
But now Andy Kaufman learns even the Transcendental Meditation movement has banned him.
That hurt him probably more than any other single thing, because meditation was a tremendous part of his life.
I believe it was absolutely one of the contributing factors that got that guy sick.
In December, he is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer.
We heard the news together, and then Andy turned to me and said, George, why don't you book me on the David Letterman show? Because this was early December. And he could ask me what I got for Christmas, and I could say, I got cancer.
Within a week, they sat us down and said, there's really nothing we can do. You might live 6 months.
And a guy that didn't smoke, didn't drink, was a vegetarian, does meditation every day. How does he come down with something like this at like this age, 34 years old? It doesn't make sense.
He didn't think he was going to die. I mean, he really thought he would just get over it.
But just in case, Andy seeks alternatives.
He'd been to crystal healers and psychotherapists and aura fluffers.
Here's a little legend for the never believer.
He was not afraid of dying. I mean, he didn't want to die because he enjoyed life so much, but he wasn't afraid of it. So when the time came, and everyone knew, and even he knew, it really was like, I guess I didn't beat the cancer, time to go.
Andy, did you hear about this one? Tell me, are you locked in the pond?
Andy Kaufman dies in Los Angeles on May 16, 1984, surrounded by friends and family. He is 35 years old. But in death, as in life, nobody knows what is truth and what is fiction.
I got calls from the Washington Post, and I got calls from the New York Times asking if this was a put-on. I mean, these kind of classy publications had not been certain whether or not it was a put-on.
Had Andy Kaufman faked his death?
He did talk to me many, many times seriously about faking his death. I mean, he was really going to do it.
I wish it were true. I'd love to hug him and slap him for doing that to us.
I don't think he did it, but, you know, you never know with Andy.
Is Andy Kaufman still alive?
In my heart he is. Andy Kaufman is alive in my heart.
That's our Andy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I love you.
By many fans, Andy Kaufman was more appreciated for his stand-up acts and concert appearances than anything he ever did on television. He frequently walked the line between audience and performer and often dared to step right over it. Now, more than 15 years after his death, a major movie and 2 books are giving Andy Kaufman an encore. I'm Matt Lauer. Thanks for watching.